You know, I'm okay with that because it's not as much as it would be if I looked like a glazed donut. Glazed donut. I couldn't say that. And we're back with another educational beauty video. Today's video is all about how to create a glowy base. So a really nice, dewy, glowy foundation base on brown skin. Now, if you do like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button so that you never miss any of my future videos. And I'm over on Instagram, so come say hi there too. Now we can head straight into the video. We haven't done a glowy base tutorial for quite a while. So, okay, here we go. I have already put my kind of like serum treatment stuff on. So I want to get straight into moisturizer because ultimately at the end of the day, you guys are going to have your own skincare regime and you can use whatever you want to use. But I do feel like it starts from the moisturizer in terms of how that can make your base also look. So I'm going to start with my moisturizer and I'm using my Wind Marrakesh Rich. You guys know how much I'm loving this right now. Just smoothing this all over my face. I'm actually going to be using a few Charlotte Tilbury products for this look because I feel like when it comes to like a glowy base, that's the brand that comes to mind because I feel like, so you know when you see the marketing campaigns and like on their Instagram, you just see so like there's just so much glowy flawless skin. So when I think of glowy skin, I think of Charlotte Tilbury. So that's what I'm going to be using, but I am using other products to kind of like set, possibly. I'm not sure yet what kind of setting powder I'm going to use yet because I kind of like go with the flow. But we are going to be starting with her Hollywood Flawless Filter in number 5. I'm just kind of like smoothing this all over my face, kind of like just applying it on the key areas. I mean, I really don't want to like kind of like apply that along this kind of mid-cheek area. And I'm just gonna like smooth that into my skin. So I'm not gonna use a brush or anything because I feel like you can just very easily blend this in. And you don't have to apply this all over. That's what I love, that you can just apply this wherever you feel that you want that kind of extra dewiness or like glow to come through. So you can see I haven't really focused on, I haven't really focused on this section here. I'm just kind of like keeping it on the cheekbones and like the high peaks of the face. That's already given me a glow. Now, if I didn't have dark circles, I think I could kind of like go with this, but it's amazing how much of a difference dark circles actually makes. So like if I didn't have dark circles, I think I could walk out like this. I'd be happy to kind of go out. But I do feel like when you do have that kind of either that hollowness or that sunken eye look, or it's quite dark around that area, then it kind of like just makes you look really tired. So if only we didn't have dark circles. Now I'm going to use my Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin Radiant Concealer. I'm using the shade 9.5. So all I'm going to do is start with my eyelids first. So what I'm doing is just applying a couple of dots and then I'm going to blend it in. So just there, that's should be enough, I think. So we'll see as we go along. And I've just got hold of a sponge and I'm just gonna like buff this in. So I'm just like pressing it into the skin. It's kind of like bouncing. I did recently do a first impressions video where I spoke about the Radiant Concealer from Charlotte Tilbury and I was really impressed with it. So this is like kind of my way of showing you how you can use it. Okay, so that concealer is all over my lids. Now I've just got my banana powder from Ben Nye and a little powder puff and I'm just gonna literally just press that into the, like not the crease, but the eyelid all over. And that's just gonna make sure that that's set. So that's gonna stay there now because that powder has kind of like locked everything in. And I'm just dusting away the excess powder with my Real Techniques setting brush. Now that's my eyelids done. So I can carry on with the rest of the face. I don't have to worry about how kind of like even my eyelids look. So you can carry on with whatever eye makeup you want if you need any or want any. Now what I want to do is go in with my concealer again and I'm basically just gonna really kind of cover up these dark circles. Now this is the kind of concealer where you can kind of like build it up quite easily and it still looks nice and radiant, which I really like. So we are just gonna like cover it up and see if we need to add any more after. Now I know that some of you may look at this and say, okay, well that's way too much concealer for me. Now what you need to understand is when I'm showing you how to do certain looks, it doesn't mean that you use the same amount as me because I use what I feel I want to use and what I feel I need for whatever look that I'm doing. So I've got that there and I'm just gonna let that sit for just a little bit. So just just a few extra seconds before I start kind of like buffing that in, you can really see that glow kind of coming through. And that's why I really love that Hollywood filter, because I feel like it's an easy way to get there. And especially if you already have really super clear skin. Like if you wanted to, what you could do is use this concealer, not use any foundation if your skin is pretty clear, and just use that Hollywood filter. So, and that it will come through, because then you've applied your concealer onto the areas that you feel that you need it, and you don't necessarily need to use foundation all over. But again, that all depends on what your skin is like. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of like buff this in, and all I'm doing is just pressing. So I'm like bouncing the sponge up and down all over my skin and making sure I'm kind of like in a uniform way. So I'm not just going randomly all over the place. I am going back, like starting from the inner corner and then working my way out. And we'll go to the other side. I do want a little bit more coverage there, so I am going to go in with a bit more. That's actually the only place I'm going to be applying concealer, because I'm going to use a foundation on the rest of my face. Now, I don't feel like I really need a lot of foundation. I just want a small amount to kind of like give me a veil of color and tie everything together, so that, you know, the concealer is nicely kind of like melted into the foundation, so that it doesn't look so disconnected from the rest of the face. I'm going to go ahead and buff this in. I'm kind of like pressing a little bit lighter now, because I really want that kind of coverage there. So I'm not really bouncing too hard, and I like to kind of take my sponge up here because it just adds a bit of lift. Okay, I'm happy with that coverage. If you guys do end up using that concealer, let me know what your thoughts are on it, because I actually really like it. I don't usually go for radiant kind of products. I just feel like it really depends on how my skin is looking. At the moment, I feel like it's looking pretty good for me. I feel like I'm happy with it. So I feel like I can kind of create this kind of look and feel like comfortable in it. Although I'm usually very kind of like wary of doing glowy looks, because I feel like you can really see the texture. Even when I do wear a glowy look, I kind of like make sure I mattify certain areas. So targeted mattifying, if that makes sense, just to sort of like mattify the areas where I've got a lot of texture, and then try and kind of like keep that glow in the areas that I feel like I can get away with it. Now I am going to sculpt my face just a little, so I'm going to use my e.l.f. Flawless Brightening Concealer. It's Rich 60W. So I like this because it's brush on, so it's just really easy. So I've just kind of like created a little line there. Now, the reason I'm using this concealer, because you probably have seen on my previous videos, a lot of the time I use a NARS Radiant Concealer, which is great, but it's not as radiant as this. Like, that's a good radiant cream. Is it Radiant Creamy? Does it say, is that what it's called? Yeah, Radiant Creamy Concealer, but it's definitely not as radiant as this. So that's why I wanted to go with this, because I feel like this is a lot more fluid. It's not as much coverage as the kind of NARS Radiant Creamy Concealer. So I feel like I'm getting what I want out of this, as opposed to, I don't really want coverage. I just want that color and that kind of radiance to come through. So I really like this. I would highly recommend it, because I feel like, you know, it's just like using a kind of contour cream, but it is kind of designed to stay in place. So I'm just gonna like sculpt my nose. So I'm just drawing, I like to draw just a little diamond, and there's a little gap on top, and then really thin line on either side of the bridge of my nose, and that's my kind of like nose contour done. I do sometimes, depends what I feel like, I don't know why, but I don't know why I feel like why it's based on what I feel like, but sometimes I draw a little line there. Okay, just a little line here and a little line there, and that is gonna, oh yeah, I forgot this. That's gonna just basically sculpt my face. So let's buff this in. So I'm just using my Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood complexion brush, and I'm gonna take this into the hairline. And if you were to not do this, add all this darkness that I've applied, and then apply your foundation, it actually would make a big difference. So if there's some of you out there who have not used the underpainting technique, which is what this is before, and you're kind of like, well, you just covered it with foundation, you're wrong, because it doesn't actually cover it. It still does come through, but it's a soft focus effect. So it's very subtle. So it doesn't look like I've heavily contoured my face, and it just looks more natural. So, okay, I am going to just buff this, and I'm just pressing, so bouncing the brush over my skin, and I just want to keep that shape there, but I just want it to kind of be diffused into the skin, so I don't want those harsh edges. And I feel like when you are kind of going for a glowy base, you really want to make sure that you do use the right technique, because if you're contouring, like a lot of people think that, okay, if I want a glowy base, then how am I going to do a contour? Because you kind of associate contouring to a matte finish, right? And I feel like that's why I really wanted to show you that you can still have that really nice sculpted look and still have that nice glowy base look. It's all about the products you use, and obviously a lot of it is your technique, but the products do make a difference as well. So that's why I was trying to explain to you how that e.l.f. concealer is very different. Although they both are called radiant concealers, the e.l.f. one is very different to the NARS one. The NARS one has a bit more coverage in there, and that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for that matte finish, because even though that is called radiant creamy concealer, I do feel like it is pretty matte. So I've just flipped over the brush so that I can use a small part of the brush because it fits in nicely with my nose, and I've kept that shape there and everything's nicely diffused. So now you can see that we've got that sculpting going on, but even where the sculpting is, it still looks glowy. So that's what I really wanted you to understand with how the finish of a concealer can make a difference to your contouring as well. Now I'm going to use my Charlotte Tilbury Beautiful Skin Foundation. My shade is 9 Neutral, and I'm just going to get some of this on the back of my hand. So just like one pump, that's more than enough. Now I'm going to go in with my sponge, and I'm just kind of like buffing it into my hand, and I'm going to buff it into my face, starting from the forehead and working my way down. So I've really buffed it into my hand so that I can get a really nice finish on my face. I don't want a lot of coverage with this. I literally just want it to kind of like be a veil of color all over my skin and to tie everything together. Go down the nose, and again, I'm constantly bouncing, and I'm not reaching for more foundation as often as I usually would. So I'm just kind of like dragging whatever I've got, not dragging in terms of like technique, dragging the sponge. I mean, I'm just like kind of picking up the color from where I've taken it here, and I'm just really kind of taking it all over so that I don't have to get more foundation. See how I went along the forehead, and then I went down the nose, covered the nose area, and then I went on my upper lip. That's my kind of like order, because then next I would go for the under eyes, and then I'd go over the cheek area and then take it under the jawline. So there's a kind of method in place. There's not just random application. Well, feels like a weird fluff everywhere in front of my face. So yeah, I'm not just taking it to random places. So now what I'm going to do is, now this is where I'm going to grab a little bit more foundation, buff it into the back of my hand, and I'm going to like buff it on the under eye area. This is going to tie in all of that kind of like concealer and that contouring together. Okay, we've done that kind of area there. We're going to now go over and do the other area. So on the other side, this is where we're going to go over the whole cheek area. See how that sculpting still comes through even though we've gone over it? It would look very different if I hadn't have put like any, like hadn't have done any contouring. Right, our base is done, but now we want to set certain areas, because obviously we don't want it to go anywhere. Like I don't want to develop creases, which are going to develop pretty quick on my under eye area if I don't put any powder there. But at the same time, I don't want to use my standard powder, because I know that's my kind of like heavy duty powder, which keeps everything in place, which is usually my Ben Nye Luxury powder in Banana, which I used on my eyelids because I'm fine with having that heavy duty powder there, because I don't want that creasing, and that area is kind of like not the majority of my face. So what I'm going to be using is actually my Beauty Blender setting powder. It's the Gemstone Soft Focus setting powder. Now it's quite good because it's got a little net there, so it's easy for the powder to come through. I've got my powder puff. I'm going to press into this powder. Now I'm not going to go straight into my skin. So what I'm going to do is just take it off on the back of my hand so that there's no, like, it's not like major powder there. And now what I want to do is make sure there are no creases. So I'm just picking up all that product with the tip of my sponge, and then I'm going to go in and press. And anything extra on the back of my hand, I can pick that up. I don't want like loads and loads of powder there. I'm going to grab my brush and dust away the excess powder immediately. Okay, now I'm going to go over and do the same on this side. Nearly forgot to take out that product. Okay. So we've got that powder on the under eye there, and I haven't spread it out to anywhere else on the face because I really want to keep that kind of glow going. But equally, I can use this powder on certain areas where, you know, maybe you feel like it becomes really shiny, or it ends up just looking not glowy, but more kind of like major oil issue going on, because this powder has a kind of like very, very subtle sheen to it. So I do like it for that. So I feel like this is a good powder because it will give you that setting, like staying power, but at the same time, it won't look super matte. So I've just got a little bit on the brush, and what I'm doing is I'm just going to take this over, like taking this over to areas that I know that I would kind of see that shine, which I don't really want to see the shine, you know, like around the nostrils, smile lines, and just kind of like around this area here, just above the brow. And I feel like that's where I kind of want it. That's it. If you do feel like, you know what, the other areas I feel like they're just not going to stay, then you can go over with this powder. I don't feel like I need to because I have taught myself for a very long time not to touch my face. So I seem to be okay, like it will stay put for me. But if you feel like you're very kind of like always touching your face, then obviously I would recommend using this powder and then maybe using something like a nice dewy spray at the end to add that kind of like dewiness back in, but you've set it underneath. Now I really didn't want to kind of like go crazy with the glowiness of this whole look, because I don't also want to look like a glazed donut as much as that is trending right now. I don't want my face to look like a glazed donut, so I just don't. It's just too much for me. Like if my skin is super smooth, there's no pitting, there's no textured skin, like then maybe I would, you know, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't want anything that is going to really enhance flaws that I may be personally uncomfortable with or I don't like. That's the truth of it. So I don't want to really give you this whole false, you know, oh wow, you can look how dewy it, like everywhere I turn and there's so much like dewiness and glow going on. That's great, but it doesn't suit me. So I'm going to be honest with you about what I feel comfortable with. And I know that there are a lot of people, like real people out there, who don't feel comfortable with their flaws, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you always have to accept everything that you're not happy with, you know? It doesn't mean you're not accepting it. It just means that I don't have to flaunt it. Hopefully you guys are on the same page. Let me know if you are, because honestly, I just see so much of everyone saying, you know, accept your flaws, blah, 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 and like all this kind of stuff. And that's great. And it's great that you feel that way about yourself, but I have to be realistic with you guys. Like there are things that I don't like about my skin, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't mean that I'm, you know, it doesn't get me down or anything, but I've learned to adapt my way of doing makeup to make me feel more confident or comfortable with that. You know, it doesn't mean that I have to, doesn't mean that by covering kind of like a lot of what I am uncomfortable with, it doesn't mean that I'm really unhappy about it or I'm down in the dumps about it. Like it just means that it works for me, you know? So I really wanted to kind of share with you a nice glowy base that is realistic, you know, that doesn't look super, super shiny all over, isn't gonna end up looking like I've got some major like oil issue out of control later on in the day. And it looks like a healthy glow that doesn't look like an Instagram filter. You know, I just wanted to be realistic with you about it. I just said to you earlier that I'd never touch my face, and I literally just scratched my cheek. So yeah, there was a hair there, I could feel it. So even now, like if I look in the mirror, I can see that some of my texture, but you know, I'm okay with that because it's not as much as it would be if I looked like a glazed donut. I couldn't say that. So hopefully that kind of answers all your questions on how you can create a realistic glowy base. And I wanted to use products that I feel work really well on my skin type for that type of look. So if you do, by the way, you know how I said that if you feel that you really want to make sure you set every part of your face, and then you're kind of like, you've set it, so you know it's not going to go anywhere, but you kind of lost that glowiness, then you can use something like this. And I think this is really, really good. This is the Tatcha Luminous Dewy Skin Mist. It's basically a spray on moisturizer, so it's great also for dry skin and if your skin's feeling dehydrated, but it does kind of add that dewiness. So let me just like kind of spray this all over, so you can kind of like, I think you can, it's hard for me to see in the camera whether you can see it, but yeah, you can. You could also spray this onto your sponge and just press it into the areas that you want that extra glowiness to be back, you know? And because you know you've already set it underneath, you know it's not going to go anywhere. This is my glowy base, and I really do hope that this has kind of like helped you. I really do love the glowiness that is coming through. It's not over the top, and I feel like it's something that I am super comfortable with. I really do hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments box below. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button so that you never miss any of my future videos. Until the next video, take care and I'll see you soon.